All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and I'm so glad to welcome Arlen Grossman for Arlen Tuesday. Hey, Arlen, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm not. Every time I look at the news, though, I get kind of depressed. It's certainly looking bad.
Well, you know what you just said, Arlen. That's, I think, how so many of us feel. I was talking to friend, relatives. People just, we don't quite know how to digest all the really bad news coming at us, often more than once, twice a day.
I was thinking this morning, and I'll ask you: what have you seen on the news that's been good lately? I mean, within the last few weeks or months, it's all bad.
Well, Arlen, you know what? You kind of stepped into that one a little bit, because I did share with you a story that I'm not too super optimistic about, but I think it's good news, where Trump is at least proposing to cut significantly the price that Americans pay for pharmaceuticals. And it does look like if this happens, if it goes through the way he's proposing, we will get a break when it comes to the costs of drugs.
Well, Hal, like a lot of things with Trump, he says a lot of things, he plans a lot of things, but will they come to fruition? I kind of doubt it. I mean, I want to see those cuts first before I praise him for it.
Well, that was your immediate response to that story, but I did share it with you. And so at least he's saying a good thing could happen. Whether it will is certainly in question. Something else optimistic about that, by the way, again, this is Halitics. It's Tuesday with Arlen. We have great guests this week. Arlen today. Tomorrow, we're going to have Kristen Marie Grimm with Mothers for Medicare for All. And then I'll be recording Thursday evening with friend of Halitics, Carlos. So a lot of really good stuff this week. And we'll continue that, obviously, or it kicks off with Arlen today. One thing that I thought was a little bit positive about that drug story, Arlen, and I don't have all the details, but I heard that at least some Democrats and maybe Bernie are picking up on this and are pushing legislation, because a big question is, A, will the president actually sign off on this executive order that HHS is proposing, that is to reduce the cost to what a group of other countries that all pay less than we do pay. So we would reduce the cost to what, say, Canada pays.
Let me remind you, Hal, that when Trump first took office this last time, he took away all of Biden's discounts on drugs. I mean, Biden had made a strong effort to lower costs of insulin and other drugs. And one of the first things Trump did was wipe that away. So,
I don't think that's true about insulin. I think the insulin price was set by Congress, so Trump couldn't change that. But I'll look into that. I don't know about some of the other drugs. But again, just the real quick point is apparently some Democrats are trying to pass legislation and calling on Republicans to join them. We'll see if any of this comes to pass. But it was kind of a feel-good story.
Sure, it's great if it came to pass. Just like Trump is, saying we're going to have world peace and we're going to end all these wars, and let's wait till they happen before we give them credit for it.
Well, you asked me for something. I'm just trying to give you something. And to be fair to Trump, and we've talked about this before, you've acknowledged that he is not the most warmongery of presidents.
I'll give you that.
All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join us. And I was thinking to myself, or I didn't say it, but I was thinking how smoothly I got this show started today. It was one of the better openings without a lot of glitches, although I did not check to make sure my phone is ringing properly, and that is always an issue as well. So I guess we got that problem. I thought you'd like the opening slide deck image I used, Arlen, because it does show the president with his new, and you being such a fan of the president, I'm sure you're very happy that he has this new, well, it won't be for a while, but apparently at some point he'll be tooling around in this beautiful, I guess, secondhand 747. And they're still working on the paint job. You can see they've crossed out Cutter with the red paint there, but and painted on U.S. of America. But I guess they have to get rid of the green paint as well at some point.
Why did you say secondhand if it's never been used by anybody?
Well, is it secondhand? I thought it had been used by the government of Qatar. Is that right? It has not been flown before?
Well, couldn't tell you. But you're saying they're working on it, so I just assumed they...
Well, I just meant they're getting the paint off of it that had the old logo on it. But I think
it's going to say in big letters, Trump on the side of the plane if he gets it.
Trump says he's never going to use it once he's out of office. It's just going to be it's going to be Air Force One while he's the president, and then it's going to go right to the Trump library. So we'll see if that comes to pass as well. A lot of criticism for Trump on this. Is it his fault, though, that Qatar wants to give him a plane?
Well, everybody wants to give him something to curry his favor. He's the president. He's got a lot of power. And I think probably everybody's trying to give him something to make them, make him happy about them.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you on this, Arlen. I asked the question somewhat rhetorically. Trump had apparently expressed admiration. He had seen the plane in his latest trip or when he was recently visiting UAE and made some comment to the king or prince or whoever rules the country, that he liked the plane. And pretty quickly thereafter, they put the deal together. I also saw something about the plane that he's riding now. The Air Force One is like 40 years old. So it's understandable they do need something new, but it should come from our government, I would think, ideally, not a foreign government. We'll see. They're going to have to renovate the plane. I think we're going to need more details. Some of the information doesn't look quite as damning as we had thought, but this is incredibly damning as the death toll in Gaza continues to surge. I believe there were another 87 killed yesterday in Gaza by Israel. You see that latest count, and of course that's almost certainly an understatement. At least that's what we always say, 53,573 official count. I always say it because that's what the authorities have said. The people on the ground say, the doctors say there's lots of bodies that haven't been counted. There's lots of people who aren't accounted for.
I just heard some good news regarding that. I don't know, I can't verify it, but I heard that Netanyahu is going to allow aid to come into, Gaza. And I think, which is a good thing. I don't know why he's doing it or if he got pressure from the Trump administration to do it or what. But anyway, that's at least a good sign.
I hope that happens. You said with some skepticism, you responded with some skepticism, and I think justly so, to the announcement that drug prices would be coming down. I also have skepticism about the Israeli government allowing humanitarian aid, food, water into Gaza. I just hope, like you, it happens. And maybe it will. I do think there was pressure from Witkoff and Trump, in the wake of his trip to the Middle East. Let's hope that that bears some fruit for the Palestinian people.
They really need it. It's horrible what they're going through. People are starving. There's so much famine, and people needing hospital care that can't get it. And they definitely need. The people of Gaza definitely need a lot of help.
Arlen, let's stick with this story for just a little bit longer. And by the way, you can see there the 87 additional deaths yesterday that were reported. And we, of course, do not let Trump off the hook. I'm less of a Trump basher than some folks on the left, or probably than anybody on the left, but he certainly bears, I believe he's guilty of war crimes, just as his predecessor in the White House is. And you have that number now up to almost 3,500 dead since he took power, and Israel re-began its occupation and attacks in Gaza, and up to 1,500 children or more. I have a question, Arlen. How did we get to this place? I mean, I, of course, as you know, been very, very, very critical of Harris Biden, now of Trump. I mean, as bad as Israel's treatment of Palestine has been over the decades, this is really a different level. I mean, it's mind-bogglingly bad. Do you have some sort of overarching theory?
Well, I think some of it may have to do with the two-state solution. Netanyahu is doing everything he can to prevent that from happening, as are probably other people. So, Netanyahu and his government probably want to control the Gaza area, and they're trying to figure out a way to do it as best they can. That's all I could think of.
I think it's right for you to center Netanyahu. It does seem like it's almost a one-man murder spree in a way. If he didn't want this to happen, it wouldn't be happening.
Yeah. And of course, his government is very ultra-conservative, ultra-Orthodox. And so it's a combination, I think, of that, his backing as well as he himself as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to excuse the Israeli electorate for continuing to give him enough votes in the Knesset to stay prime minister. I'm not going to excuse that. That's wrong. I'm not going to excuse, obviously, the people who in the Knesset who vote for him to be prime minister, or the military, or the U.S. government. All are complicit. But still, he is the leader of the country. He is the commander-in-chief, and he has to ultimately bear the most responsibility. Just a monster.
Well, you know how really Israel and the United States are kind of in the same league with this, because how did we allow Trump to get all this power and control? How come the United States voters allowed this to happen? And then it goes the same with Israel. So I think there's a lot of similarity between Netanyahu and Trump and the situation that we're in now.
I give the American voters a little more slack. I think that in Israel there were more choices. It's a multi-party government. You don't have to vote for either of two center-right corporate-backed parties. They have more options available to them in Israel. The two candidates in 24 were both, unequivocal in their full-blown support for Israel. There was really no choice unless you, like me, were prepared to vote for Jill Stein or another non-Republican. You had to vote for genocide. That I don't believe is the case in Israel.
I don't know. I know he's under a lot of pressure, and he's under a lot of legal pressure too, because if he's out of office, they're going to go after him for legal problems, and he might end up in jail. Something that Trump should have been in jail for what he's done, but he managed to avoid it. I don't know if Netanyahu could do the same.
Arlen, so to that point that you raised, the culpability of the American voter, let's get to this story by one of your faves, Robert Reich. We're going to I'm going to give him a little bit of grief, and even you, one of his loyal fans, may not be totally in agreement with what he writes. But this is kind of, I think, an article that does make the point. This is from Reich. This is his newsletter. I got that today in my inbox. I'm sure you get the same. But it seems to me that Reich is not prepared to excuse those who voted for Trump or who didn't vote for Harris or who didn't vote for Biden in any way. He's now reacting very aggressively against the talk that there was a cover-up to prevent people from realizing just how bad Joe Biden, how bad he had declined cognitively. Do you feel like that there was such a cover-up, and did that perhaps help Trump get elected?
Oh, I'm sure there was a cover-up. There's no doubt about it. He was at an age where he was getting very old and starting to decline cognitively and physically, and the people around him, his family and his staff and all that, they should have told the American people, and then maybe Harris would have had a chance to start a little bit earlier in her campaign. She started so late, it was really too late. So yeah, I think there was definitely some neglect, serious neglect on the part of the Democrats who were in the White House, as far as telling us what was going on with Biden.
And that neglect, or that even beyond neglect, I mean, conscious decision to mislead us with respect to his abilities, intellectually, his abilities were really in decline. That conscious decision, conscious decision, I think you're saying, and I agree, made it much easier for Trump to get reelected. Given that fact, and you're nodding, so I think we agree, I would just take one issue. You were saying it would have given Harris more time to campaign, or maybe someone else, there would have been a real primary battle, and someone else would have emerged from the scrum besides Harris, who might have had a better chance of winning.
I think she was an attractive candidate. People seemed to like her. She was positive, enthusiastic, but like we've talked about before, she decided to go with Biden's views and not try to stir things up or change the positions from Biden. She was just too, as vice president, she was just too close to him, and her job was to agree with him on things. And when she was able to run for president, she seemed to continue that. And we agree, it's a mistake. She should have said something about the Gaza situation and other things, but she didn't.
Well, and we agree that she didn't run a great campaign, but on the other hand, we don't agree that she was an ideal candidate or she was the best candidate. But I don't want to dispute that. I don't want to get into that argument. My point would be this, with respect to what you were saying. Even if, as you say, she was an attractive candidate who likely would have won had there been a contested primary, wouldn't that have been better? That would have been a better outcome, right? Don't you think the Democratic voters, many of whom did stay on the couch, they didn't vote for her, many sat home. If there had been a contested primary season and she had emerged victorious, wouldn't she have gone into the general election with perhaps, first of all, more battle tested, and second of all, maybe there'd be more buy-in from the Democratic base?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think she was, about all we could do right now. I think that actually the Democratic Party as a whole is to blame for all of this. They, the last few years, they haven't done what they need to do as far as, what the people really wanted. And like we've talked about, they're really into corporate money, and they shouldn't have been. And so that kind of the difference between them and the Republicans is not that much regarding that. So, and then somebody as powerful as Trump, with all his charisma and confidence, he had a lot going for himself, even though, he doesn't ever tell the truth.
So given what I think is kind of the received wisdom, pretty much understood across the political spectrum, that the Democratic, as you say, the party, certainly party leadership, people who were on the inside, really did something very bad. They did something that was harmful. That is, they presented Biden as compos mentis when he clearly was declining. Given that, why do you think, and I ask this seriously because I know you read Reich religiously and you've listened to him, why would he write something which I think we both agree is false, that the so-called Biden cover-up, as he puts it, is an irrelevant and even contemptible distraction?
Well, it's something that needs to be talked about because it was real, and the people around Biden really did cover this up, and history books will say that, and it will, and definitely was to Trump's advantage. But the Democratic Party, by the way, has too many old leaders and people who aren't willing to really stir the boat up, stir the water up, and as opposed to the Republicans, the Trump and the MAGA people who are just, full blown on the offensive. That they want people to believe that they're going to solve everybody's problems, and they're much more enthusiastic than the Democrats were.
You said something, Arlen, that really gave me pause, and I think it's correct. Once you said it, I was like, yeah, that's right. About the aging of the Democratic Party. And Reich himself is, I don't know quite how old he is, but I'm going to guess he's in his mid-70s or older. I'm going to look that up now. Do you think maybe that's part of it? He's like, hey, I'm going to defend the old guy.
Well, a lot of Democrats, were very loyal to Biden. They don't want to see anything negative come out about him. But you have to criticize the Democrats for allowing what happened to happen, because everybody could see that Joe Biden was not doing well and not a very powerful candidate. And and for that reason, Trump won as easily as he did. It's history is going to have some bad things to say about the Democrats. By the way, the Democratic leadership is just rather conservative in a lot of ways. They don't push hard to make things change, to give, to make differences. You've got Schumer, he's old school. You've got Hakeem Jeffries, who talks real well, but he doesn't really push for anything strong or, radical. So the Democrats need to make some changes.
Arlen, we've got a caller on the line, and they're from Monterey area, so I'm going to assume it's one of your legion of fans. Let's see if we can get that caller. I got you on the line, caller. Who do we have?
This is the biggest fan of Hal.
It's Carl. I can recognize that voice. Dulcet tone. Carl, real quick, I'm going to just jump and interrupt. You have a really nice voice. I don't think I've ever told you that. I'm sure Arlen agrees. You speak very clearly and precisely. Did you, and I know you were in radio, did you ever broadcast or were you ever behind the mic?
I did not have the desire or the confidence, I should say, to go behind the mic. And my voice has gone through different iterations as my health has had different issues. And I did work, though, and I'd like you to know this because I'm very happy to experience it, even though it was not a great success. But I did work at KABC Radio at the very prime time when the company took the Dodgers on, and a guy named Superfan, who you probably don't know, went to jail. And that is a lot of balls went in the air at the station, and chaos ensued. And the timing was just perfect for me because I had wanted to work at the station, and I just had called on a very frustrating day, and I ended up getting a job as a producer, we like to call it, or a call screener, as the union called it. And I worked with all the best people there, Ken Minyard and Bob Arthur, with, I don't know if you know who they were, but they were a very big radio duo in the morning drive, 5 to 9, with the Ken and Bob Company, they called it. And Michael Jackson, I worked with him a lot. I've got pictures I really value of some of the guests and the hosts at the station. And I worked with Bud Ferrillo, who was the sports editor. I don't know if you know who he was, of the Herald Examiner. Before, when Superfan was fired, he was a very big radio success, kind of a bully, big mouth kind of guy that people liked. And he really represented himself as a fan favorite, but he actually went to jail for a year for defrauding the government with Vietnam trucking. He had a trucking company. Anyway, I really had a great 3.5 years there, and it was a strike in 1977, big year for me, that ended up causing me to leave the station, and destiny sailed down the river without a paddle, I may add.
There's no question.
Go ahead.
Carl, there's no question. You were in talk radio at a time when it was at its most successful moments. I mean, it was very popular, and they were the top of the line. But, as things change over the generations, talk radio is not a big thing anymore. You had Rush Limbaugh before and Alex Jones and a lot of those people. But, talk radio is gone, and now it's all internet. It's all social media, and it's a different ballgame.
A bigger ball game, and that's why we have such a proliferation, et cetera. This is, to me, talk radio. It's interesting because it's not over the air, and I don't want to get into it because I can't. I've pondered my navel gazed, and tried to understand it and verbalize it. But it's really very, very just interesting how we now communicate, if you will, and the social interactions, and particularly the fact that people are not communicating with each other. and these ideas of actually interaction and, everybody with their face and their phones, etc. I live in a university town in Santa Cruz here, and it's a great, very, very forward-looking university. So anyway, I would love to go on about me, because that's a subject I really am still learning about.
Well, let me just ask Arlen this, and then I want to hear your question or concern or whatever you were calling for, Carl. But do you agree, Arlen, that Carl has a nice radio-friendly type voice?
Oh, absolutely. And he talks very well, but he lacks the confidence, I think. He's not willing to put himself out there, and, he thinks he won't be judged well, but he would be, in my opinion.
You sound confident when you speak. I heard the radio station owner of the station that we used to compete with up the coast offer you a job. I know it really wasn't a job because I don't think it was paid, but still, he was like, "Yeah, you're impressive. Take an hour and do your thing."
I was not offered a job. I was not offered a job. I worked for you as a salesman, Hal.
Yes, but you were offered a slot. You were offered a slot. I heard him offer it on radio to you, a slot.
You're thinking of maybe Billy Sunshine?
A slot?
Like an afternoon hour.
Who offered me a slot?
Michael Zorling. I was listening to you. You were doing a guest appearance. He asked you to be a guest. He'd heard you talk about something on the show, maybe with Billy. And then you were on, and he said, "Hey, you're really good, Carl. I'd like to have you do an hour."
You missed it.
I'd like to address particularly about Michael Zorling, and Arlen is actually quite knowledgeable about this. I don't want to overtalk your time too much, Arlen, but what you heard was I didn't want to drive up from Monterey to talk to Michael Zorling. And Michael Zorling is one of the few people I really like to badmouth, because he put that, what did you say? What was his name again, Arlen? See, this is one of the reasons I don't want to go on.
Alex Jones.
The guy, Alex Jones, yes. And I wrote him a email, how, what was that comment of by the guy with the House Un-American Activities? Have you no shame, Senator, when the lawyer for
Joseph Welch, I believe, who was representing the military when Joseph McCarthy had said that it was infested with communists.
And Joseph Welch said to him, "Have you no shame, Senator?" And I said basically the same thing. Don't you have any shame putting this guy on? I think that was the one. It was really when I heard the guy for the first time. It was a terrorist attack somewhere, and he was calling it a false flag. And I was thinking about these poor people somewhere in the Midwest who had to suffer the loss of their child or something, and then they got this clown, mean-spirited, nasty voice guy. And I think, why do you put this guy on when you have a choice of who you can put on? And what else did he do? He ended up putting on that Southern Belle, who was such a hateful person. What was her name, Arlen? Do you remember her name? Billy Sunshine knows, because she was, on the air. Georgia. That was it, Georgia. I
don't think it was Georgia. Isn't Georgia? Maybe it was. Maybe I'm confusing her. I want to be really, I don't want to spend too much time on this, not because it's not interesting to me, but I don't know how interesting it is for listeners. And also, I just don't want to focus on another media, harshly, that doesn't have that much. But maybe it was Georgia. I don't remember who you're talking about. I'll look that up. But let's get back to the topic du jour, if we can. Okay. Carl.
Let me get a word in now, because I want to get off just as much as you want. Anyway.
I'm not trying to get rid of you. I just want I want to change your focus.
You're carrying the water for Fox. And so is Arlen, but not as like you, because you want to just stir the morass or the mess like, you knock the New York Times. And yeah, nothing's perfect, Hal. I hate to be the one to tell you this in the world. People make mistakes, even your people close to you, maybe even you. And there are sometimes errors that are made, but the New York Times does thorough reporting. These are journalists who have self-respect as well. And anytime you're going to keep knocking them and stuff like that and trying to hurt their credibility, you're doing just what you're doing now, carrying the right-wing MAGA water, even though you might not want to do it. Now, here's the point about Biden. I drank the Kool-Aid because I was a Democrat. And I will even reiterate and remind everybody that the two other people listening, that Biden would be better than Trump right now had he won the election, because he had lucid moments. He was not an incompetent boob drooling like Trump has characterized him successfully, and how Fox has every day been calling him incompetent, and that interview with her was bad, and he was definitely too old. We all knew he was too old from the beginning. It was a fate. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but he should never have run. He knows that. But I can say, because I recall after the debate where the jig was up, if you will, I still was saying, he'll make the right decision. And, he did make the right decision, as hard as it was for a man in power like that. And it's not the first time people play. Sports is a good example of athletes who play long after they should have quit. They still have the confidence, but they don't have the legs. And that was the problem with Biden. But God forbid, let's drop it. He's done. He's passed. We can't change it. We lost the election. We're not saying he won and Trump stole it. We are all rolling over and saying, yeah, Trump won it. But, the bottom line is Trump is the guy. And we have to resist his contamination, or what he's doing to the Constitution. And it's all, the presidential orders right now. It's starting to seep into the Congress. And these lackeys who just roll over for him. It's just sickening. And I don't want to hear, it just, bothers me too much on an emotional scale. And so, and that's one of the reasons I try to keep off the phone and all that, because I really can get worked up now when I start talking about it. And I'd rather enjoy life and smell the flowers, literally.
Yeah. I'm going to disagree with Carl a little bit. I don't think Biden really wanted to go. I think, when he finally had to resign, I think he was forced to by other Democrats, by Obama and Pelosi and all those other prominent Democrats. I think in his case, and it's ego. I mean, politics is a lot about ego. He thought he could do it, and he was wrong, and it was a major mistake, in my opinion.
Well, the Fox, Arlen, with the Fox deal that I'm saying, they were attacking, and you know this as well, they've been attacking every Democrat as soon as the name comes up. They're working Gavin Newsom now. They're working Whitmer now, as well. And Crockett, she is just, they try to treat her like just I don't even want to characterize it, because I do have some self-respect. We've got a president who says, shove it up your ass. Can you believe that a president will go on and be such a crude idiot and not realize that he is supposed to be a symbol of respect? You got the Beverly Hillbillies in there that live in Queens. It's just sickening. It's just hurtful to watch this. And I've been trying to, I felt this way in 2016. So I don't want to keep this going. But Arlen, the matter that I'm saying, I was arguing with you back then about Biden because you were saying get him out of there. And I was like, I don't know what to do, because, that was the Democratic Party acting up and getting him to admit and drop out. But his recalcitrance and his going back on his statement that he was going to turn it over to the next generation, which would have probably worked. And God knows what's going forward. But, I got to believe in the people of this country. I mean, I don't know what to believe, because people still are killing each other and babies are being slaughtered all over the world. It's just sick. I just can't believe what I'm witnessing. But I know that there are people out there that are right thinking and that are heroic. And Jim Acosta's still out there, and maybe this Substack and all these people are out there, and people like, Hal. I wish, your focus, I think we agree on a level, but you're such an iconoclast in certain ways. You're such a guy on the fringe that, when you go support a third-party candidate like that, like you do, and you have a right to, don't get me wrong, but, it's just like the same, Perot and all that. Anyway, I thank you for your
All right, Carl. I see. I don't want to really get into it with you at all, because I know this. You take it really seriously, and I can hear the pain in your voice, and I feel it. So I respect that, and I respect your sharing your position. I don't want to make things harder for you. I do want to read to you something that's on the screen if you don't drop off, and you can drop off. I don't think this is going to trigger you. I think what Robert Reich expresses in this segment, which maybe you can't read. I don't know if you're on the phone, you're on a video phone or what have you, but I think this is what you're saying. Why look back to Biden at all, says Reich, when there's so much that needs to be seen right now. There's so much that needs to be seen right now, so much that's so devastatingly, frighteningly dangerous to all of us, when the fate of American democracy is hanging by such a thin thread. So that's kind of your view, right? Like, we're missing the forest for the trees if we're not going to just focus constantly on how bad Trump is and all the awful things he's doing. Is that fair to say?
We've already paid the price. We lost the election. And that's why these Republicans are standing in line and letting this guy embarrass them, to stand in line and, come on, drop, no grandstanding, vote for my big, beautiful bill, all this kind of garbage, and they just roll over. It's absolutely pathetic and sickening to see it in my mind. But the fact is that that Biden has already gone through it, and any further focus on it is just supporting the Fox and MAGA narrative, and this whole thing starts boiling down to the narrative. And Obama, yes, he will work behind the scenes. Most of these things are done in back rooms. They're not done like Trump sitting at the Resolute desk and just saying the first thing off the top of their mind. I mean, how many times did you see presidents sitting back in the chair with his slumped with his body language the way it is, and it's just sickening. I gotta laugh, because that's the good thing about me. I'm lucky when it's so absurd. I just finally laugh and say, why am I getting all worked up about it? I'm very happy up in a beautiful area near the ocean in Santa Cruz, and the smell of I really don't want to let myself get too worked up for it. I'd like to think I could do something.
Well, I wish we could. Do you have any thoughts on that, Arlen? Last word with Carl. Then I'm actually going to take Carl off, because I want to move on a little bit, although riff on some of what he had to say. But Arlen, go ahead and respond to Carl now if you like.
I agree with much of what he says, but I think he is getting too worked up. And Carl, I would suggest you open your door, go outside, and look and smell some flowers, and just calm down, because it is bad out there, and we have to take care of ourselves, and it's not easy.
All right, Carl, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go at this point, but please call back again soon. I don't totally reject what Carl has to say. I really get it. I mean, we focus, we are looking at the past, but it's very recent past, and it does implicate directly on what's happening now. That's where I think Reich gets it wrong. The other point I would just make, Arlen, on this, and I wanted you to respond to, is I think by championing Biden, people like AOC and Bernie hurt their credibility. And I think people are right to question how much they can be trusted, because they told us things that really just weren't true. And these are politicians who are out touring the country, calling for Americans to vote for Democrats, to do everything they possible can do to resist Trump, to telling us how awful Trump is. And, you know, I know you feel that, you agree with that, and I know Carl does, but lots of other Americans don't see him as you know, Satan incarnate. And when a critic is like a Sanders or an AOC is discredited because they tell us things that aren't true, that we know aren't true, we're less likely, I think, to believe them going forward.
Well, Hal, don't forget, Donald Trump says things that are untrue all the time, and yet people still accept what he says. But I disagree with you somewhat on AOC and Bernie and all that. Yes, they may have supported Biden at a certain time, but you know they're trying to keep some popularity within the party and not be rejected. If they came out against Biden, they would be rejected and never have a chance to do anything. But now they are listened to. I think they're doing well. They're they're the ones that are speaking up and getting big crowds. And I hope the future will belong to AOC and to some extent, or Bernie.
Well, Bernie's definitely more of a creature of the past, I think. But
he's sharp, still sharp.
All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join us with Carl, hopefully getting some fresh air. Let's talk about that plane. We discussed it briefly. I want to just show this. Maybe we won't spend too much more time on it, Arlen, but you flagged this article for me, and I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about it. I don't know how closely you read it. If you don't have more to say, I will. But really about not just the plane, but also his use of some sort of Trump coin, right? He has some sort of crypto.
Yes.
Tell us about that twist in the story.
Well, I think the basic thing is that Trump doesn't mind profiting from, being president. His family is on board with him. They're putting big Trump towers in certain countries, and they're totally ignoring the Constitution, which has an emoluments clause that says you can't make money off the presidency. He doesn't care. Of course, he doesn't really care about a lot of things in the Constitution, but he obviously, has no problem with, getting profit from from being president, and he'll probably continue to do the same.
Well, what the story also did go into, yes, the plane, which, as you pointed out, we do need a new Air Force One, and it's, this is an updated version, certainly, of the 747, which is a plane that's been in use now for probably 60 plus years. I think it came out in the 60s. So it's an old design. Still works great, but the planes themselves, after a while, they need to be at a minimum refurbished. So it's not unreasonable for there to be a new plane. The question is, again, how much is Trump going to benefit from it? The authors of this piece, Eisen, Cantor, and Painter, make the point that it isn't just the plane, but also there are various transactions now that are being done in crypto, including a particular type of crypto, which
Trump meme.
Trump kind of makes a market in. So he has a lot of it, and it'll benefit him if it's used.
And here's a great sentence from that article. It says, how can we trust someone who's in charge of regulating crypto that could benefit from if he benefits from tax regulation? So it's true, he's the one, he has so much power, and he could make the crypto thing work for him and enrich himself, just like Elon Musk has probably found lots of ways to enrich himself and will continue to do so.
So this is where I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, Arlen. I agree with all you're saying about Trump. Trump is awful. We need to get rid of Trump. But isn't it a little bit disingenuous to argue, and I'm not saying you are, but for one to say, well, we have to get rid of Trump, so therefore we have to vote for Democrats. When Democrats have done a lot of the same things, You could argue they're not quite as bad in certain areas, and I would argue in certain areas they're worse. Don't we need to come up with something that's just different than these Republicrats? Because there's so much bad stuff they do too. And I show this quote here. This is our friend Robert Reich again, just bashing Trump for that plane, which, to be fair, they're not really gifting to Trump. I mean, it is going to the government, the U.S. government. Apparently, he'll get it in the end, but will he use it? He says he won't. But yeah, gifts are really bad. Foreign governments shouldn't give gifts. That gift is apparently going to the U.S. government, at least at first. But what about this gift? I mentioned this to you, and I talked about this yesterday. When Hillary Clinton's Secretary of State, Qatar gives the Clinton Foundation $1 million. And we didn't hear outrage from the Democrat, but we didn't hear anything from Robert Reich. So, and this is, that's a long time ago, but it's kind of ironic because she's leading the charges against Trump. Don't we need a party that this doesn't happen? Either party, both parties, some new party?
Yeah, it would be nice if we could. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy coming from all sides, from Hillary Clinton and just about everybody else. That's just the way of politics. It's good if it's benefits yourself and your party, and it's bad if it benefits the other party. So what we really need, as I've said often on your show, Hal, is we really need a new political system, a new election system. And I don't see that coming anytime soon. So I don't know what the answer is. And Democrats may be the only realistic place that we're going to get some relief, because maybe if in the midterms in 2026 the Democrats take back the House, that'll hurt Trump as far as cut down his power a little bit, and that would be nice, but it's tough all the way around.
Yeah, I think your answer is as good as anyone can come up with, right? I mean, there's so much fatigue. You heard the sadness in Carl's voice, and he certainly, from my sense, and I think from talking to him, blames most of this on Trump, and you heard him defending Biden. But the actual news that distresses him, such as the babies being killed, that's not just Trump. I mean, that's both parties are responsible for so many of the horrible things we're observing, the ever hotter temperatures. Now, I put tongue in cheek that I guess global warming must be a hoax, because April 25 was only the second hottest April on record. 24 was the hottest. So I guess it's getting cooler now. So we don't have to worry about that existential threat. But, all kidding aside, obviously we do. It's terrible. But yeah, both parties have led us down the garden path. And how we get off that path, I don't know. I don't have the answer, and you don't either, Arlen.
Well, Hal, the real problem is the fact that it is the rich and the billionaires and the corporations that run this country. They can give unlimited amounts of money to their candidates of their choice, and they are expanding the difference in an inequality between the rich and the poor, and Trump's doing everything he can to give tax cuts to the rich. So, I mean, the Supreme Court allowed all this to happen. So there's a lot of major things wrong. But when it comes down to it, I think basically it's money. It's who's got the power, who's got the money to elect the people that they want and get the things that they want. And I don't, it would be nice if the Supreme Court would look at this in a different way. But right now, it's not going to happen.
Well, I do want to just give one possible small answer, small suggestion. Just like Maryland, we have a Green Party gubernatorial candidate who's been on the show, Andy Ellis. California, likewise, has Butch Ware. So I'm going to urge my California audience to vote for Butch Ware. I'm sure that'll put a half dozen more ballots in his tally. But I would just note, Arlen, that I don't agree with everything that the Green Party has on its platform. I don't agree with everything that Butch Ware stands for. They're far more identitarian than I am. But that said, the money, which you correctly, I believe, assess as the biggest it is the corrupting factor. It's the biggest problem. Green Party candidates, as I understand it, they don't take corporate money. They only take small dollar donations. And that goes an awful long way for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Green Party has great ideas, and I would love them to do better. But you're also fighting against the corporate media. They're not going to give the Green Party credit or anybody else other than Republicans and Democrats. Any news. I mean, they just they're run by corporations, and they're very conservative in a lot of ways, and that's another big problem.
Well, that's why we do this, Arlen. We hopefully cut through that a little bit. You wanted to talk about this story here from Jamel Bowie, not my favorite columnist, but very interesting. And I think it's fair. So go ahead, tell us what it was that Bowie had. Well, some of it's fair. What did Bowie have to say that struck you?
Well, he mentioned three things stand out as contempt for the rule of law. One of them is the president's assault on the right to due process. I mean, this is in the Constitution, and they're ruining it. And also the second thing is suggestion by Chief of Staff Stephen Miller that the president might suspend habeas corpus. Again, another assault on our Constitution. And the third thing he mentions is the part about the gifts from foreign governments, the jet and everything else. Let me just see one thing here. Conservative support for this type of governance is not an aberration. So he's saying that the right wing has always liked this idea of a strong leader and so they're getting really what they want, and they're going for it. And so he's not surprised at all that there's a Trump who's doing what he's doing, and he thinks the conservative movement has always been looking for somebody like him.
Yeah, no, you definitely summed it up very well. I appreciate that. I did read the article at your suggestion, and I think he points out some terrible, terrible things that Trump is doing, and they are certainly fascistic. This complete contempt for court order, that a man who was without question wrongly deported, wrongly arrested, needs to be brought back into this country, and it's been flouted, ignored. It's horrible. I mean, it's just an awful, awful thing. It is, one of those horrible things that Carl discussed. So I share the outrage without question. I think pretty much we all should. This guy, Stephen Miller, is a very, very bad egg. He's a scary guy. He was kind of behind the Trump deportations policies and the separating families, which I believe the new pope, or the old pope certainly said, was just an absolute, the new pope was an absolute, crime. It is. It's so horrible. You don't take children away from their parents. And the pope, because, and Catholics would feel that way, especially it's a sacrament and the family and children. So, this is absolutely right. And then the final point, he talks about habeas corpus. Well, I don't think he's going to be able to. Amy Coney Barrett wrote a law review article that concluded that the president absolutely cannot suspend habeas corpus. So I don't know that he's going to be able to get away with that. Maybe there was a decision recently where they gave him, did the court give him some leeway until they made a decision, or they reversed them?
Venezuelan population, they're allowing them to send them abroad, and even though it's obviously wrong, but they're allowing him to get away with that for at least a while. And when it comes down to it, Hal, there's only one branch of government that's going to save us from Trump, and that's going to be the judiciary, the Supreme Court. And we don't know for sure if they're up to it, if Trump might just roll over them very easily. And, because of course the Supreme Court doesn't have the enforcement power. Trump has all the power. He has the army, he has the Justice Department and everything else. So, but they're the last backup, I think, is the court system. And so I hope they hold.
Yeah, I mean, I think things are really bad. I'm not quite as convinced that the end game for Trump is a dictatorship, a tyranny, or that will transpire. I think we haven't quite seen the end of representative government in this country, although clearly our legislators and executives don't do what the people want or what's best for the people, except on rare occasions. So we don't have much of a representative government. I'm not convinced that it's going to be gone in the next few years. I do think the better backstop than the courts ultimately should be Congress. He has this very narrow majority, especially in the House. If Democrats are smart about it, if they argue in persuasive ways, I think they can blunt Trump's power. I think this is where I have a real problem with Bowie, is how he describes the right wing and conservatives. Generally, he says this is who they are. He is so contemptuous, and he doesn't say Republican voters, but I believe from reading him in the past, he has such disdain for, he appears to hold in such disregard Republican voters that he, in my view, makes it impossible to try to persuade them, to try to bring them over. He would say, well, there's no way, you can't do it. I disagree. I think that Republican and Democratic voters have more in common than they have in disagreement, to be perfectly honest with you. And the parties thrive on dissension and divisiveness. I think Bowie feeds into that.
Well, it certainly is apparent that the Republican Party is very weak now, has very little power. They don't ever criticize Trump. They go along with him on everything because they're afraid they could get primaried if they don't. So I just don't know. I don't know that Congress is going to be the answer. And also I kind of worry about what kind of election we're going to have next. There's a lot of things that Trump could do to mess up our elections. The states have done a lot of things that will, help the Republicans and the MAGA voters. And so I don't know. I hope we have a fair election in 2026. That's about the best we can do, I think.
I mean, I don't know how fair they'll be. We've certainly seen a lot of ways voting rights seem to be eroded in certain ways. And definitely it's coming from the right to a much greater degree than it is from the left. Although the argument is made, I think Bernie Sanders made the point that there really hasn't been a fair Democratic presidential primary since 2008. And I think he's not wrong there. But in terms of actually being allowed to vote, being able to cast a ballot, the Republicans are the ones who are trying to suppress votes. I think that's clear. Did you have anything else you want to say on Bowie? This was another story. I'm just going to put this headline on, but we can stick with Bowie for another moment or two. These were stories that were very interesting to me that you recommended. This is a little bit of a smaller story, maybe, but still of interest. But do you have anything you want to get before we talk about this George Saunders piece on the Library of Congress?
Well, the Saunders piece is just one aspect of this whole government, and and then the intention of the Trump people to take over the government, because what they're doing is they have a very good Library of Congress person in charge of the Library of Congress. They're getting rid of her so they can get somebody that's that thinks like they do, and that goes for almost anything in government that's written down now. They're trying to block out anything that has to do with race, gender. They're pretty much censoring a lot that the American people have access to, and that's one of the worst things. Well, Saunders
isn't real clear as to what, and probably because he doesn't know, but it appears that the White House is firing Carla Hayden, the current or former librarian of Congress, and he implies strongly that it's because she has at least voiced some support for, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. He points out that the pretext for terminating her services is clearly bogus. Couldn't be that she had, had some book or something they don't like. They say put an inappropriate book in the library, which they couldn't. He says the librarian doesn't choose the books that go. I don't know what books go in the Library of Congress. It has to do with sales. It has to do with, I don't know how many reviews they get. Do you know? Because I used to think every book was in there, but obviously that's not the case.
I don't know that much about it. It's something that, people just don't talk about. And so I really don't know much about it. But basically, Hal, when you come right down to it, Trump is trying to take away the leadership in every department and every part of government that isn't loyal to him. He wants complete loyalty from everybody. And, anybody that thinks differently than he does is going to be gone if they haven't already been gone.
Well, the story is troubling. I don't know, if there's any legitimate reason. There's none presented in this piece, but obviously Saunders is critical of the decision to terminate Hayden services. So he doesn't, probably think there's a legitimate reason. Maybe Trump had something in mind that we don't know about, but it's not presented. Arlen shaking his head. Do you know that for a fact? I mean, honestly, have you read some other articles about this? Because I was totally new to me.
That there's no real good reason for getting rid of her. Other than that, she's not a MAGA loyalist.
All right, let me ask you this, Arlen, because this I don't know either. And I'm sure a Trump supporter or someone in the middle might say, well, is it routine for the president to replace the Librarian of Congress? Is that somebody who just, serves at the pleasure of the president, and it's kind of a plum? It's a political plum that is passed down from the president, new president, to somebody favored?
I really doubt it. I mean, I think you're giving Trump and his people more credit than they're due. They just want to be dictators. They want to take over this country. They want to be in charge of everything, and they're doing an awfully good job of doing it.
Well, I'm just asking the question. I'm really not trying to come up with excuses. It's something that came to my mind. What is the general procedure? Is this something that happens regularly when there's a new president, or is it, somebody usually serves as librarian for 20, 30 years? Because you go to the same library, you go to the library when you're in high school, and there's a 35-year-old person behind the desk, and then 30 years later, you go back to that same library, and you see the same librarian. Their hair might be a little lighter, but otherwise it's the same person. So I don't know if that's how Congress works or not.
Well, I don't know about the Library of Congress, but there have been other positions that he's not supposed to be, getting rid of the people on top, and he goes ahead and does it anyway. And who's going to stop him? I don't know anybody.
Well, one case that's very clear is where Doge locked out the Department of Peace. I don't know if you've heard that story, but a court just ruled that the Department of Peace, which is a congressional created office, does not serve at the pleasure of the president. The president cannot terminate its board, and they were ordered to be reinstated.
Oh, yeah, there's some pushback by the courts, and I don't know how far it's going to go, but they have to stand strong. Otherwise, we will have a full-blown dictator, because it's certainly heading in that direction right now.
All right, let me show real quick, Arlen, because I think this does support your theory about the Librarian of Congress tending to be a long-serving post for people who, maybe they'll retire. It's not a routine by any means for the president to replace them. So we'll just go back to 1975, which, if my math is correct, that's 50 years. And you have basically, as I look at this, 3 official librarians over that 50-year period. Daniel Borston, pretty well-known person, serving from 1975 until 87, so 12 years. Billington, appointed by Reagan, was in office all the way into Barack Obama's second term. And then Carla Hayden, who, interestingly, she was appointed by Obama. So you had Ford to Reagan, Reagan to Obama, and now Hayden served for 10 years. I don't know how much we can make of that.
Probably very little, because I'm assuming the librarian position is not anything that's political at all. They just kind of keep charge of things. I think what scares me the most is what I hear from other libraries, other colleges, other towns, where they're taking out books about minorities, about gender, and then they're keeping books like Mein Kampf and other right-wing books, that they're okay. But if anybody has books that are that have a bit of DEI in them, they're gone. And this is censorship.
Arlen, we're through the hour. We've gone over the hour, but I do have one more story I wanted to just ask you about. I talked about this yesterday on my show, and then of course I'll give you the final word. But I was curious if you were familiar with the situation involving the NYU student who gave a speech criticizing the genocide. He used the term genocide several times, and now has had his diploma held up by NYU. If you had any reaction to that story. And I actually am going to ask you a pointed question, but I wanted to just get your thoughts on it beforehand.
Well, of course, it's definitely anti-free speech. You can't, get your diploma taken away from you by what you say, by your political point of view. That's just fascistic.
What if the student, and this, I agree with you, I was very critical yesterday on my program of what NYU did, but what if the situation was, and I was talking to somebody who disagreed, who said, hey, college graduation speech, that's not the place for politics. Okay, well, it was in this case, but okay, I hear that, I disagree. But what if the speech had been the other way? What if the speech had been very pro-Israel, had been very supportive of what Israel was doing and critical of the college protesters? Would you take the same position?
Well, if that was the case, then nobody would even think about taking away his diploma. That he's got the right thing, the establishment point of view. So it's not an issue at all. But this other person obviously went against the establishment and those who in power, and so she's got to fight for her diploma if she's going to get it at all.
I'm not so sure that you're right on that, Arlen. I could see NYU, although they might get pushback from wealthy Zionist donors, I could see them saying we have a very bright line. We do not allow these type of controversial issues to be discussed. Maybe they would have, maybe they wouldn't have. I know if the speech had been pro-Israel, there would have been a lot of booing. I know a lot of the folks in the audience would have been very critical of it and would have, turned their backs on the speaker or what have you. I would say this. I'm going to just give my view. I think if you gave a pro-Israel speech, you should have your diploma withheld. I think the message matters. I would make that comparable to a speech where you're supporting the Nazis in 1941. You're saying, yes, we do. Why are we criticizing Germany? They're just trying to maintain racial purity. We need to support. So I think, as much as a lot of liberals say it's all about process, you have to have bright line tests, bright line rules that are equal-handed. No, I would say in some cases the message is very important. And if it's the message I agree with and I like and I think is pro-people and pro-humane, it should be allowed. And if it's the opposite message, it should not be.
Well, I think if we're going to, stick to the First Amendment where we're supposed to have free expression and free speech, just about anything that's said up there by the parliament, by the person that's speaking as a student, I think anything should be allowed other than, hateful things like, we should kill all this minority group or whatever. You can't allow that. But everything else, I think, should be open to, people have to listen to it and they don't have to agree with it, but at least they don't get their diploma taken away.
Final word, Arlen, from you on any topic, anything that you didn't get to say or you didn't get enough to say about.
I'll tell you, one thing I've been thinking is I'm just overwhelmed by what's going on in the news these days. It's just so many things happening all at once. It's hard to keep up with it. But the direction it's going is something that I'm not happy with.
All right. I don't think that's, to be frank, a particularly controversial view or one that many of us would find surprising or don't share. It's tough times. It's tough times.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me, Arlen. Really appreciate it. It's great to have Arlen with me, and we have sometimes spirited disagreements, and what I really, really appreciate is Arlen's totally good with it. He never has a problem with that. I know some people do, so I'm grateful that he doesn't. Tomorrow we'll have Carla Grimm, and we'll be talking mothers for Medicare for all.